Joining us now on Open Book is Gretchen Carlson, a former colleague of mine and somebody who always was very nice to me on the air, which I remember fondly, Gretchen. So thank you for that. She is the author of a New York Times bestseller, Getting Real and Be Fierce. You just an amazing voice, a speaker, a trailblazer, but also somebody I've gotten to know, Gretchen. I like you a great deal. And so I'm a supporter of your efforts, as you know. And want to talk to you a little bit about everything because we're talking about Miss America. We're talking about a highly successful journalist and author, but you're also helping to pave the way in, let's call it the Me Too movement. I sort of feel it's like a We Too movement, not just a Me Too movement, because everybody's involved in it. And, I have a daughter and a mom and a sister. And so and it's important for me to make people feel safe. So I like to call it the We Too movement, but let's call it the Me Too movement. Tell us where it all started.
Well, Anthony, thanks so much for having me on. It's always great to see you. And thank you for supporting Lift Our Voices, which is the nonprofit that I created after my Fox story 6.5 years ago already. So that's really, where it started for me. I guess my life is testament to the fact that life works in mysterious ways. And certainly jumping off the cliff and coming forward at Fox News against the former CEO and chairman, Roger Ailes, with regard to sexual harassment was something I never envisioned myself doing, nor did I ever expect it to turn out the way that it did in igniting an international movement. But I'm grateful every day that I'm helping millions of people, most of whom I'll never meet. And this has just become my passion project to make workplaces safer. I think that we thought we had solved this, right? I think a lot of women and men thought that this kind of crap doesn't happen anymore at work. And this was really an eye-opening experience for the American public when they realized that, number one, it was still happening. And number two, it was being covered up. And that's what I'm fighting against. I'm fighting to give people their voice back. And I love the title of your podcast, Open Book, because, unfortunately, you mentioned the books that I've written, but I cannot be an open book about what happened to me at Fox because of the silencing mechanism I had to sign called an NDA, which is one of the things I'm fighting against.
Right. Well, there's a lot here to unpack. So I want to start with some of that because I think that the general public, listen, I grew up in a blue collar family. So my friends and family members that have watched you over the years, when somebody says an NDA to them, they don't really get it 100%. So I want you to take us through it. So you had situations that made you very uncomfortable in the workplace, very well documented. They decided that they were going to settle with you and they made you sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, so that you wouldn't share the sordid details of what took place. So you want to stop that movement, so to speak, because from a public policy perspective, if you can't sign an NDA, it'll force more responsibility on executives, men or women for that matter. But let's face it, it's mostly men who are doing things that are egregious, a result of which it'll put more pressure on them, or actually they'll end up getting fired as opposed to just the woman is upset, she gets paid out and signs an NDA. What did I miss?
Yeah, that's really sort of the vicious cycle that's been going on for the last 40, 50 years. And I go all the way back to Anita Hill. I think you and I are about the same age. That was one of the first stories I covered as a journalist.
I'm lying about my age, Gretchen.
Okay.
You look, I'm probably not allowed to say this, but I'm going to say this. You don't look your age, so we can continue to lie together.
Continue to fool people. But ironically, it's one of the first stories I covered, and I was promptly sexually harassed on my first job in television right after that as well. But I bring that up because my own theory is that that's when all the cover-ups inside companies really started, because that really gave, a name to what sexual harassment was. And I think a lot of companies at that time were like, oh, we better start doing sexual harassment training because now everyone's talking about this. But at the same time, I think a bunch of smart lawyers got together and said, how the hell do we make sure we do not have an Anita Hill at our office? And that's when they started using these silencing mechanisms and really ramping them up. So there's two silencing mechanisms. You talk about NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. 1/3 of all Americans sign those on their first day of work, including me. So on your first day, you're basically walking around with a muzzle on at work for anything bad that happens to you later on. And then something bad happens to you and you want to come forward and they're like, oh, ha, the joke's on you. You signed an NDA, so you're already silenced and there's no way you can talk about this. The second thing that you sign on your first day of work is something called a forced arbitration clause. And when I say that, people go, huh? Nobody knows that they're signing this, but this is what exploded after Anita Hill. In 1991, only 2% of all employees had these arbitration clauses in their employment contracts. But by 2024, 84% of us in America will have these in our contracts. And this is a device also of silencing people. In simple terms, it means that if you want to come forward about anything bad that happens to you at work, you can't go to an open court. You've already signed on the dotted line that you're going to go to something called forced arbitration, which is a secret process where nobody ever finds out about it. The deck's stacked against you from the start. And it protects the predators because nobody knows this is going on. You get pushed out of the workplace. They get to keep working. And so the vicious cycle continues. So these are the two things that I decided to roll up my sleeves after I talked to so many survivors after my story. They'd all been silenced in this way. And I decided I had to do something about it to the best of my ability. And so I started walking the halls of Congress. And, you know, I'm really proud to tell you, and again, thanks for supporting us. At Lift Our Voices, we passed 2 bipartisan pieces of legislation last year in the most hyper-political time of our generation. And you know, I'm so incredibly proud of that because this is actually going to be my legacy. I don't really give a damn about any other TV interviews I've done or presidents I've interviewed or people I've hobnobbed with. None of that matters to me as far as how monumental it was to get these 2 laws passed. So what it means now is if you experience sexual misconduct in the workplace, you no longer have to be forced into the secret chamber of arbitration. You get to come forward if you want to and go to an open court. Number 2, the Speak Out Act was also passed in December, meaning that you no longer have to be subject to an NDA for sexual misconduct if you signed one on your first day of work. So pre-dispute NDA. So we've accomplished a lot, Anthony, but we still have a whole lot more to do because I'm fighting not just for sexual misconduct. I'm fighting for any disenfranchised group in the workplace. So race, gender, age, LGBTQ plus discrimination, disability, all those people are still subject to all these silencing mechanisms. And so we still have a tremendous amount of work to do at Lift Our Voices.
Listen, I'm obviously blown away, impressed by you. And I just want to say this to you, and I want to get you to react to this because you had a 2:00 show on Fox. You were gracious enough to invite me on. And I came on. I walked onto your set. We had a great conversation. It could have been geopolitical or economic or so forth. But at the time you and I met, behind the scenes, okay, in your first book, Getting Real, you had a tremendous amount going on. You had a lot of commotion going on. You were being harassed. You were being intimidated. Yet you were showing up for work. You could never tell. I have to confess this to you, and I almost am embarrassed by this. I had no idea, Gretchen, that any of that was going on. And so as a human being, from one human being to another, I have a heartfelt empathy for that or issue with that. I think about it if it was my daughter or my wife or my sister, mom, or something like that. I want you to address that if you don't mind. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the tension that was there. And then you had to make a decision because there were other women at the same time going through something similar. And they were like, okay, geez, I have to shut up because I need to make this money or I need to do this. There's a lot of equivocation that happens when this goes on. Again, I'm not blaming them either, by the way, because I understand that as well. But tell us about those feelings, the feelings that you had in 2015 and 16, and then what caused you to finally go in the direction that you ultimately went in.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you everything. This is when my brain goes into lawyer mode and I have to really choose my words carefully because I do have that NDA too, actually.
Okay.
And so I can't share everything. So
I'm more interested in the feelings and less about the facts.
Ironically, I can't even talk about my feelings. That's how broad these stupid NDAs are.
Well, that's good to know. Then that's why it's important to.
No, they don't listen. They don't want you to be able to say, that you were. They don't want you to be able to say how much it sucked. Okay, so let me just give you a hypothetical. So pretend this isn't about me. It was like walking down a hallway every day with a knife in my back and blood streaming out and me looking behind wondering who was coming after me next. I'm just giving you a hypothetical for what a movie could be about. Yeah. And, the problem with these NDAs, if you sign them on the first day of work, is you can't warn anybody else. And so I had signed one of these. So I couldn't tell anyone else what my personal experience was. Arguably, I wasn't even supposed to tell my husband, but, I did. I told him I'm thankful and still blessed to have my parents in my life. I told them. I found out from my lawyers that I could tell my minister, which actually ended up being one of the final things that made me jump, because my grandfather had been a minister. And this minister friend of mine, we cried together a lot. And she took my hand at the end and she said to me, "Your grandfather is looking down on you. And he's telling you to do it." And that was just like, and she said, "He's proud of you." And that was just, and then I looked in my children's eyes and I had no idea what the hell was going to happen to them or to their mom. And I did it. I think what helped me to jump also, Anthony, was the fact that Fox fired me. They took away what I had killed myself for over 30 years of getting to the pinnacle of the television industry. And I was good at it. And they took that away from me. They fired me. And that, the confluence of those things all came together at the same time. And I decided to jump off. And I often say that there was absolutely no safety net below me.
Sure.
I thought I was going to come home and cry my eyes out for the rest of my life and spend more time with my dog. Needless to say, what the safety net became in my life were all these women started reaching out to me. And I was like, holy shit, this is an epidemic. This is an effing epidemic. All these women have been pushed out of the workplace. And the second epidemic was that they'd all been silenced. And that's when I decided to roll up my sleeves and get to work, because I was like, I have to honor all these people who have never had a voice. That's what made me write the book, Be Fierce. And then, just moved into all of this advocacy work that I'm doing. So that was really what made me, I'm blessed to have my family. My kids, actually, I found out that courage is contagious. My kids got it from me now. And it's been a blessing for me to watch them grow up, especially my son, because we spend a lot of time talking about empowering women to stand up and speak up. But really the crux of this whole problem is men. It's getting to our boys young so that they learn to respect women in the workplace the same way that they look at their mothers. And I know I've given that to my kids. And my son, one quick story, he saw me on CNN one night talking about all of this, and he was waiting for me when I got home in the kitchen. He said, "Mom," he said, "is it true what that other woman said on TV, that once every 83 seconds in our country, somebody is assaulted or harassed, a woman?" And I said, "I'm so sorry to tell you that that is true." And he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, "Mommy, as a young boy, I want to help fix that." He was 12.
I mean, I don't want to interrupt you. See, I've learned from the Gretchen Carlson good interviewers, when someone is saying something so meaningful, keep your mouth shut. I want to ask this. I think this is enough of a hypothetical where perhaps you can answer it. What do you wish you knew now about your Fox and Roger Ailes experience? Like, meaning, what do you wish that you knew then that you now know now about it?
I wish I, would have had the courage to stand up earlier. I probably would have saved a lot of hell for people. But then I could say that about everyone else who never stood up either. I wish I would have I wish in my early 20s, when I was sexually assaulted twice, that I would have said something. Instead, I stuffed it down inside of my heart and hoped it would never come back up, like so many other women are socialized to do. We're not supposed to talk about it. I didn't even call it sexual assault until I was writing Be Fierce. Until after my experience at Fox News, I admitted that these other two things had happened to me.
Right.
And it was just me trying to break into the TV business when I was Miss America, actually. And I cold called high-level executives, some of whom are still living. And they sexually assaulted me, both of them in a car, not together, in different episodes, 3 weeks apart from each other. And I never, ever told anyone. And until I wrote my first book, Getting Real. So I think, look, it's about all of us deciding that we're going to stand up and speak up earlier. And it's easier said than done. With all the women who still reach out to me, I say to them, coming forward is such a personal choice, because you're still going to be maligned and you're still going to be retaliated against. I'm working tooth and nail to change that, but it's likely still going to happen to you, because changing culture and the way we look at these issues is tougher than passing bipartisan legislation. Tougher. So, my advice to them is, I'm here for you and I will listen and try to guide you, but it's your personal decision, because you will likely lose your career still when you come forward. And that's the piece of the puzzle. That's my ultimate goal, to change that part of it.
Do you think that newsrooms have changed at all since your outing, if you will, since your declaration of what is actually going on? Do you think Fox News has changed at all? Has there been a transformation in any way?
I'd love to answer that question, but I can't. All I can say to you is that if they've changed, then why don't they let me out of my NDA? I've asked to be let out of my NDA. Right. If everything's changed there, then what's the problem? So that should answer it.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the problem is obvious. They don't want the past, either it hasn't changed or they don't want the past to become their present in terms of the news cycle. I want to talk about this legislation, though, that you worked to pass last year. Congratulations. I think it's amazing. Go into a little bit more detail about the bill. Why was it needed, and what was the process like to get there? I had an 11-day horrific experience in Washington. I got my PhD in how these people operate. It is very hard to go from an idea to getting quote unquote bipartisan legislation passed. So take us through that sausage making, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's really easy to introduce legislation. If you ask members of Congress how many bills they've introduced, they'll probably stand up and say thousands. And then when you ask them how many they've actually gotten passed and they say zero or one, that proves how difficult it is. I think that what helped me in this process was that, specifically with Republican members of Congress who arguably had watched Fox News, and I was there for a long time, they knew who I was. And I think that they thought that if that could have happened to me at Fox News, maybe they should listen to me. And so that's how I got in the door and got meetings. By the way, I've been a registered independent my whole life. So I see things on both sides. I voted for both Republicans and Democrats. And I know people often think like you had to be a Republican to work at Fox News, which was not the case for me. But I think that's helped me to be able to tell my story as much as I can to Republican members of Congress. And I think they trust me. And quite honestly, I needed at least 10 senators, right, who were Republican to get past the filibuster, to pass any kind of legislation. And even though the House then was controlled by Democrats, I still needed a wide swath of bipartisan support to send a message. So I think that was my first strategy, was to try to go after Republicans first. I also went after Republicans who were retiring, because I felt like they would be more bold and would make, would side with this tends to be more of a Democratic issue, getting rid of these silencing mechanisms. So I had a lot of strategies in place. And then I also decided to just take a bite out of the apple instead of going for the whole thing in one big fell swoop, because I knew we would never get Republican support for all of these other things that I'm talking about for other protected classes. And so I decided to just, let's tackle forced arbitration and NDAs just for sexual misconduct and see how far we can get with this. And I will tell you that I saw a lot of hearts and minds changing over this 5-year process of trying to get these bills passed. I think that members of Congress, just like the general public, started to realize that this movement is not going away. And if they know me, they know I'm relentless. And so I'm going to keep pounding on the door. And I saw them change their hearts and minds about this. And slowly but surely, I got more and more Republicans to come to my side on this. And so after a 5-year journey, when it went to the arbitration bill went for a vote in the House, we got 113 Republicans. That is seriously bipartisan. Thought we were going to get 25. 3 days later, it went to the Senate, and unanimously it passed in the Senate. And then my strategy proved to be, I think, a good one, because a mere 7 months later, I passed the Speak Out Act, the NDA bill. And that was my strategy all along, is take a bite out of the apple, get people to come to the table, talk about these issues, and then move on with the next iteration of it. And that's exactly what we're doing. And quite honestly now, Anthony, in 2023, I'm already moving forward with going back to the table again on arbitration. And okay, who can we all agree on that we should protect next? And so I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag next, but I'm going to tell you that this year I plan to pass another bill.
Well, listen, I'm rooting for you. I want to test something on you, and then I want to get your reaction. So I recently interviewed Jamie Fiore Higgins. She's the author of Bully Market. I think you know Jamie. She spoke out about her experiences at Goldman Sachs. She was very honest about how in the beginning she sort of felt complicit because she was trying to run her career, and she was afflicted with these Me Too events, and she looked the other way. I have this feeling that I'm going to test on you, that there's a quote-unquote machismo in the workplace. Okay, I'm being yelled at for interviewing the likes of you and Jamie Fiore Higgins. Why am I being yelled at? I'm being yelled at, well, because I'm not machismo or alpha enough, meaning like there's an unspoken protocol. And so therefore, if you are siding with these women, then you're outside of the men's club. Okay. And so I want to get your reaction to that. Actually, I don't give a shit about that. It's my podcast, so I'm allowed to curse about it. If I gave a shit about it, I wouldn't be interviewing you. Okay. If anything, I think we need to break through this nonsense. But I want to get your reaction to that. Am I right about that? Did you sense that at Fox, that there was this sort of unspoken protocol? And then secondarily, what do you say about that? Okay, because every one of these men have wives that they wouldn't want sexually harassed, or daughters that they wouldn't want sexually harassed, yet they want to walk around with this like machismo alpha fraternity-like swagger. So what's your reaction to all that?
Well, first of all, real men stand up for women. So
amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank
well
you
said.
for that.
Amen.
And it's the only way we're going to change this vicious cycle. I mean, let's be real. The world is still run by men. Okay. I don't love that part of it necessarily. I think we should have more female CEOs. We should have more females in higher positions of power. That's how we change all this crap. But as long as men still rule the world, we got to get them on our side. So I extend the olive branch to men. I don't care how macho you are. Come join my team. Come join what we're doing at Lift Our Voices. Change the policies at your company, because you're pushing out the exact people you want to retain that increases your bottom line. Women 100%. And people of color. So
Goldman ignored Jamie, Gretchen. They should have brought her in.
Yep.
All they had to do is say, you know what? We're going to have a town hall meeting. Jamie, describe what happened. I'm the CEO. I really don't want this happening. It's just bad for business. It slows us all down. Keep your, you know what, in your pants inside the office, and I'm laughing a little bit about this stuff because I'm not going to mention the name of the august journalist, journal, if you will, so you'll get where I'm going. But I had a 6-month where people were looking at me, accusing me. The journalist no one was inside my office. They went down LinkedIn and they identified every single woman that worked at Skybridge and called them and said, did Anthony Scaramucci sexually harass you? And these women were calling me saying, I don't know why this guy's asking me this. Of course, you didn't do that. finally I had to call the editor in chief. I said, okay, you're working on this for 6 months. You can't find anybody. How much longer are you guys going to do this for? The point being is that the fish stinks from the head down. If you are sending a message to people, Fox could do that. CNN could do that. ABC News. I mean, it's sort of like an orgy going on at ABC News, apparently. I don't know. But you could basically, fish stinks from the head down. This is how we're going to operate. If you don't like it, leave.
Yep.
And so how do you get more men to speak like that?
Well,
not with the cursing, of course, but you know what I mean. The general, hey, enough is enough.
Yeah. Well, look, you're exactly right about how this all works. It's all about power. Okay. And that's why the way in which you describe the machismo men, that it's hard to give up power. It's hard to accept change. That's why I go on my Twitter feed someday. Not everyone likes what I'm doing because I'm disrupting the system. So power is very difficult to give up. That is what this is all about. And you're right. It starts at the top. And so what I try to do is get to CEOs, because those are the people that can actually make a change. Imagine the change in dynamic. If a CEO at a company gets everyone together and says, I will not tolerate this. And if this happens to you, you come to me directly, and I will make sure that we do an independent investigation, and I will try to preserve your job, and we'll get rid of the bad actor. That changes the entire dynamic of how things work inside. Instead, what currently happens the majority of the time is employees go to HR thinking they're doing the right thing, and HR is not your friend. They never will be. They've done a great PR job of making employees feel like that's the place to go and they're looking out for you, and they're not, because they get their paycheck from the company. They're doing everything in their power to protect the company. So now you go to HR, and if you have a forced arbitration clause or an NDA, you're screwed. And they look at you and go, you're going over here to the secret chamber. No one's ever going to hear from you ever again. They don't tell you that right away, but they're like, oh, we're going to go to arbitration. It's going to be cheaper and quicker for you. And nobody will have to know about this. That's the system we need to change. And CEOs can change that in a split second by going to my website, liftourvoices.org, and taking the language I have for them right there, and they can change their policies today. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing, Anthony, now, is I speak to CEOs and I tell them, the train has left the station. The movement's not going away. Join me now, or eventually I will force you to do it, because I will continue to pass more laws. So if you want to get a good PR boost right now, do what's right, honor your employees, let them own their own voice, and let's move forward on this path together.
I mean, it's very well said, Gretchen, which is why I think you are such a powerful, influential voice for the movement. What advice would you give to women out there? What would you say to women of all ages that are starting their careers or in the middle of their careers or finishing their careers? What would you say?
Raise your sons to be vulnerable so that we can work on not just women being the ones that show emotions and that we deem that to be weak. Encourage your sons to show their emotions. It'll make them better people in the long run and more respectful of others. When you get into the workplace, look at what you're signing on the first day. Start asking Start asking on the first day, instead of just saying, "What's my vacation time?" and what's my health care? Do you silence your workers? Do you have forced arbitration clauses and NDAs? Do you silence people on the first day on the job?
Yeah,
that's really important to normalize all of this, by the way.
Yeah.
And then, if something bad happens to you, I encourage people to talk about it and speak up, because that's the only way that we can change the system. We've learned that by talking about these issues is how we solve them. And so the more of us who talk about them, the more that we can solve it. But again, the onus should not just be on the women. The onus is not on women to change this system. The onus is on all of us to come together to understand the problem and to decide that we want to work together to change it. Shouldn't only be on the shoulders of women.
Let me push back and do a little bit of role playing with you, and I want you to respond to it. So, Gretchen, I hear all of that, but, I'm a blue collar kid. I went to state university. I now got this amazing job at this very high profile corporation that's going to lift me from the lower middle class into the upper middle class, possibly even the wealthy class. And there's a certain system in place, and, I need this for my family. So I am going to shut up, and I am going to sign this, and I'm going to play with inside of their rules, because I don't want to be a rabble rouser that could potentially get knocked out of this job that I desperately need, that I think is so important for me. Your response to that is?
I totally understand that. And that's why I'm doing the work for you. Because I understand that there are people out there that don't have my profile or my megaphone, or quite honestly, the balls to go toe to toe on it. They can't afford to. And I understand that. But for those who do decide to at least ask questions about these silencing mechanisms, that will start the process of normalizing it. And then I would just point out that sometimes we forget the power that each of us individually has. And I will point to the Google walkout, if you remember that several years ago. Everyone in Google all across the world walked out on one day. And what was that all about? People might remember the walkout, but they don't remember what it was about. And they don't remember that it was all on the shoulders of one woman who had the idea to do a walkout to protest arbitration clauses in Google contracts.
Yeah. Listen,
and everyone walked out, men, women, in countries all around the world. And you know what happened the next day? Google took arbitration clauses out of their workplace.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened. Look at Rosa Parks, right? I mean, she got on the bus, said, "I'm too tired. I'm not moving. Sorry. Let's, and then they got forced to change it, and obviously change comes with pain, unfortunately. Okay. So I do this with all of my authors. I have 5 words or phrases. I ask you to react to them. Okay. So let's start out with the first one. Ready? Miss America.
First classical violinist to ever win the title. The only reason I did it. And I paid for my last year at Stanford University with the scholarship money that I won.
All right. It was a cool experience though, right?
Yeah. I didn't know how long you were. Yeah. But look, again, my life works in mysterious ways. I was a tomboy growing up. I played football with my brothers outside. I happened to play a mean violin. And 50% of your points were based on talent. And I quit the violin when I was 17, and my mom really wanted me to keep playing. So she got a brochure in the mail about Miss America, saw how many points were talent. She called me up when I was studying at Oxford, actually. And she's like, "I found something for you to do next summer." I was like, "What?" She said, "Miss America." I'm like, "Are you high?" But look, my mom's been an incredibly motivating part of my life and my rock. And
well, I'm sure in addition to your grandfather, she's very proud of you.
So I ended up it was there was a tremendous amount of luck involved, but yes, it was a wonderful experience. It got me into television, gave me amazing communication skills, and made me realize that I can give a speech even without notes for an hour, which I was forced to do on many occasions when I was Miss America.
#MeToo.
Never in my wildest dreams believed in my life that I would be one of the instigating forces of the Me Too movement. Never planned it, not something that you would ever aspire to put on your resume, but thank God we're still in it.
Fox.
Well, let's clarify. Fox News.
Fox News.
There is a Fox network.
News. Okay, let's clarify. You're right. Fox News.
Originally went there for the opportunity of a lifetime to do what I always wanted to do, which was a Monday through Friday national morning television show that gave me the opportunity to show my smarts and also my personality. And never envisioned that it would turn out the way that it did, or that Fox News would be what it is today.
Megyn Kelly.
I don't really know Megyn that well because we worked on opposite ends of the time spectrum. I would just say that I'm thankful that she also added her voice to the Fox women who came forward after I jumped off the cliff.
Roger Ailes.
I heard through the grapevine later on that he actually feared me. And that makes me sleep at night.
Interesting. Yeah, no, listen, I knew Roger, as you know. I mean, I had several interactions with him, and he was extremely talented, but I would just be very candid with you because I'm a man. I never saw that, but I wasn't close enough to him to be inside the perimeter to actually see any of that. Not surprised by any of it, of course, because, I've worked in big corporations and I watched this go on. And I think this is the message. This is why I wanted to bring you on Open Book, because the message is this is going on. It's not just at places like that or other media establishments. It's going on in large and small corporations around the country, and it hurts business. It's not good for business. Okay. Also, more diversity leads to greater innovation and greater economic ideas and more money. Okay. So I don't care if you're a green lesbian from Mars. If you're talented, I want you at Skybridge, and I want you to feel comfortable and safe working at Skybridge, period, the end. And so your voice is so important for all this stuff. And I know that you're only getting started, Gretchen. So before I let you go, what's next? We have some legislation you're working on. Is there another book in the offing? What else are you thinking about?
Writing books is easy. Selling books is almost impossible in this day and age. So I'm not clamoring to do another book right now. Yes, more legislation on the horizon at the state level and also the federal level. Putting together the first ever corporate rating system using my metrics of silencing mechanisms, which we will publish hopefully at the end of the year, which will be eye-opening and where we will be giving companies a rating of whether or not they silence their people. We feel like employees need to know before they go to work whether or not they're going to wear a muzzle. Raising my two beautiful children, continuing to do that, and you never know. You never know what else I'm going to get involved in. I never say no to any sort of like, what are you going to do next? Because my life has just led me in many, many different directions. So right now, that's what I'm focused on. And I also have a startup, a tech company that I'm going to be starting up, but that's far away from an announcement. So stay tuned for that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to have you back. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that when you come back. Gretchen Carlson, she's a New York Times bestselling author, Getting Real and Be Fierce. And she's a trailblazer. And I'm proud to call you a friend, Gretchen. I really do appreciate you coming on Open Book.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for your support.
Open Book is Admiral James Stavridis and Elliot Ackerman. Now, Admiral is a retired 4-star U.S. naval officer. He is the former dean of the Fletcher School. Elliot Ackerman is an award-winning author, and he's a Marine veteran. The book today is 2054, but we had a prior book, so this is sort of a part 2 of 2034, which was a bestseller a few years ago. I read that book, and I wanted to hide in a bunker. I felt like I was reading a presidential daily brief is what I actually really felt like, because, you guys have had access to that. You know how crazy that is. So I want to thank you both for joining. Let's talk first about the new novel. It's a sequel to your previous bestseller. You went to Tufts too, didn't you, Elliot? I believe you did, right?
Did, yes.
That's right. Well, we're going to leave Tufts out of this right now because, I don't know. They got to get the screws back on the machine there, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
Although once a jumbo, always a jumbo. But let's just talk about 2054 for a second. Why did you guys write the second book? Obviously, the first one was a bestseller, so that's probably the reason. But knowing the Admiral as well as I know him, he wants to get this information out into the public domain about what the existential risks are. So,
well, it's wonderful to be on the All Jumbo podcast. The idea right from the beginning, Anthony, was to do a trilogy of books. And the first one, obviously, as you mentioned, 2034, about a war with China, big risk. The second novel brings artificial intelligence and civil conflict in America to the mix, but keeps that geopolitical overlay. And then the third novel in the trilogy will be out in a year or so. is 2084, which is about climate and the geopolitical consequences of that. So I would say all along, we were in the mode of thinking trilogy and thinking cautionary fiction. But I'll let Elliot tell the story of how we came together as co-authors. It's a good one.
Yeah, and even though you said we'll keep the tough stuff off the podcast, it's inevitable in telling the story how we met. So Jim had the idea for 2034 and pitched it to just by coincidence our shared editor Scott Moyers at Penguin Press, who's sort of the third musketeer amongst us. And he said to Jim, well, this sounds great, but have you thought about working with a novelist on this? And I work with this novelist named Elliot. And Scott didn't know that Jim and I had a previous friendship from our time at Tufts, and that when he was dean of the Fletcher School, he had me there for a semester as writer in residence. So we sort of had this, loose kind of conversation that we've been contemporaneously having, just all about books. And so that was sort of how we were matched up, was through this Tufts connection. And so we sat down and just started, one chapter at a time, writing these books and taking on this sort of larger 3-book project.
Oh, the only reason why I was saying not to bring up Tufts, they're in a little bit of a controversy with everything that's going on right now. And I don't like throwing eggs and tomatoes at them. I just wish them well. We can certainly talk about them. I had a great time when I was there. But here's what I want to ask you, because I don't want to give up too much of the plot line. The book is so good that you guys really wrote that proverbial page turner. You want to get to the next chapter. I almost want to go to the back of the book to see what the hell is going on, but you're like, okay, let me just try to get through this. It's a very enjoyable book. But I'm going to ask you some broad questions, if you don't mind, about U.S. existential threats, okay? The Soviet Union, Mr. Stavridis, Admiral Stavridis, they have hypersonic missiles?
Very much so. And in fact, Anthony, as you probably know, they're using them in Ukraine. And these are missiles that go 5 to 6 times the speed of sound. There's really no classic air defense counter for them at the moment. So that's a very concerning aspect of current geopolitics.
Mr. Ackerman, the United States has how many aircraft carrier strike forces? 11?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Don't ask the Marine about aircraft carriers, but yes.
Okay, but is that the right footprint? Given what you've written about the world we're living in, is that the right footprint? We're gonna let the Admiral chime in here as well, but is that the right footprint for military? If you're going to redesign the American military today, is that what you'd be doing?
I think we are at a moment of real existential change militarily. I also work as a journalist, Anthony, and I just came back from Ukraine, and they are fighting a radically different war there. It's a war that's equal parts 20th century conflict, all's quiet on the Western Front in trenches, but also could equally be Starship Troopers. It is also very high tech. So this merging of high tech and low tech is something that is going on right now across militaries, and it should be forcing us to rethink how we fight, and probably rethink how reliant we are on our carrier battle groups.
Admiral, you want to chime in there?
I do. I agree with Elliot, and I'll make a very practical point. The Black Sea Fleet of Russia has now lost almost 40% of its pre-war ships, despite the fact that Ukraine doesn't have a navy. Ukraine has taken them out with cruise missiles, drones, unmanned surface vehicles. So you've got to question the survivability of those huge aircraft carriers. And we have a lot of defenses around them. But if it were my choice to make, I wouldn't be building $10 billion aircraft carriers. I'd probably take that $10 billion, divide it up, make very capable, smaller size ships that can be stealthier and be more survivable than I think current conditions warrant.
Okay, so again, staying on the existential side, we have this conflict in the Ukraine. I'd like you both to chime in on this. In 1994, the Ukrainians gave their nuclear weapons up. President Clinton said, we're going to give you security guarantees, but you got to give your weapons up. They decided to give their weapons up. I think we had something called Operation Porcupine there for a while, where we were supplying them with lots of deterrent like weapons. What happened, guys? What happened? Did we slow down the arms? What happened to Operation Porcupine? And now make the case to the American people why we need to be supplying them. This is sort of like a Lend-Lease from the 1940s. Make the case.
I'll take a crack at that. I think the large case of why we need to be supplying them is that this is and that's an argument that's been made, but this is a conflict and aggression in the region that if it goes unchecked would be like a contagion and disrupt Europe in ways that we as Americans will be paying for. Maybe not in 2 years, maybe not in 3 years, but certainly within 5 or 6 years. European stability, European economic stability is the same as American stability. And then briefly, how did we get here? I think just through a certain degree of complacency. It's been a very, very long time. There's been a land war of this size in Europe. And I think for many Americans, and certainly for many Europeans, it seemed unimaginable up until the very moments and hours before Putin launched his invasion.
Can I just add, and Anthony, you're the macroeconomist here and global investor, but we don't have to imagine what it would be like if we allowed Russia to simply sweep across Ukraine and take it. There would be knock-on effects, and the global economy would suffer significantly. And again, we don't have to imagine it because we saw all this happen in the late 1930s when we failed to stand up to Nazi Germany. We failed to stand up to the Imperial Empire of Japan. We had come home at the end of World War I. We rejected the League of Nations. We erected massive trade barriers. How did all that work out? Well, you can drop a plumb line to the Second World War, 80 million dead, and the consequences of ignoring a festering problem like this are pretty clear in history.
Okay, so listen, guys, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, that's about as articulate of a list of reasons why we have to be in the conflict. And so not to make this political, but why can't we get that out there more? Why can't we get out there that the notion of 5 to 7% of our military expenditure without the loss of American soldiers, servicemen and Marines, et cetera, to put a hurt on a group of people that we know is expansionist? What am I missing? Can somebody chime in? Because obviously I'm a failed political apparatchik. I got to stick to business, but you guys know politics better than me. What am I missing? Why have we not been able to make this case successfully to the American people?
I think sometimes if you look at the history of American politics and particularly American interventions, we and our system of government lends itself to more short-term decision making. We think in 2-year election cycles. I don't say that to be pejorative. It just sort of is how it is. So try to convince the American people, hey, we need to do this so that in maybe 5, 6, 7 years we haven't seen Europe go the way it went in the 1930s, and then we have to cross the Atlantic and intervene. It's sometimes more difficult to connect those dots, and particularly at a time when we're coming off of 20 years of war in the Middle East. So the American people are smart, and I think they can connect those dots. And the one thing I would add that makes it sort of unique is that I think national identities are often formed by national antipathies. So there's nothing more American than knowing that the Russians are up to no good. So we get this one in a way we wouldn't maybe if it wasn't Russia invading Ukraine. But still, as we're saying, it's an uphill fight to keep people focused on this conflict outside the 2-year mark.
I would only add to that, and Anthony, you're the master strategic communicator. Truly, it's a skill you have.
Well, ask Donald Trump about that, James. I don't know. I got fired after 11 days.
That's your badge of honor. But the point is, the White House, the current White House, needs to be pushing this more into the conversation. Needs to get more surrogates out talking about it. And the point you made a moment ago, which neither Elliot nor I did, but you're right to bring it up, is how small the cost is here. The Ukrainians are asking for $50 billion. The Europeans have already kicked in $50 billion in the latest round. So we'd be matching the Europeans. It would keep the Ukrainians in the conflict another 2 years. I guarantee you Putin can't survive that. And the bottom line is $50 billion. Yeah, it's a lot of money, okay? Our defense budget is $900 billion. The European collective defense budget, second largest in the world, is $320 billion. So can we find $50 billion, please, to stop this challenge in Europe? I think we can, and I think we need articulate spokesmen to get out and talk about it.
I'm going to test something on both of you. Joseph Stalin. He was interviewed in the 1930s by Henry Luce. Okay, there was a rise of Nazism going on. This is after Hitler rose to power, and Joe Stalin told Henry Luce in no uncertain terms that he was going to splinter and destroy the United States. And Henry Luce said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" And he said, "Well, we're masters at manipulation. We're masters at propaganda, disinformation, cleansing pictures, and you guys are a mongrel nation. You're not tied to a bloodline. It's really just an idea. It's nothing more than that. And we're going to get you hating each other. We're going to make it very tribal in your country, and hopefully it'll splinter the country and cause a second civil war." Luce went back, wrote about it. Didn't happen. Our grandparents happened to love the country. They got here as immigrants. Then the war started. It galvanized the country. And there was one piece of weaponry, though, that Joe Stalin didn't have, and that's social media. And so you guys know there are server farms all over Moscow that are pumping out toxic information into the West, France, UK, US. You write a little bit about the AI stuff that goes on in 2054. Is Joe Stalin right? Can he help? Can the Russians? We've got tribal issues without the Russians. Can the Russians and their propaganda, and the Chinese with their propaganda, put a hurt on this beautiful idea known as America?
I worry about it deeply. I do not despair about it. As Elliot said a few minutes ago, the American people, given time, will figure this out. And in terms of social media, the social networks, yes, it is a new lethal weapon. And of course, Putin is taking a direct page out of Stalin. Putin is watching what China is doing to a lesser degree at the moment, but he is seeking to divide us. And I think it will take some hits. We'll feel the pain. As you said, it'll put the hurt on us. But I remain cautiously optimistic. And in the end, 2054 is a cautiously optimistic book, because all these technologies, from the printing press to electricity to today, artificial intelligence, all of them had potential for both good and evil. I'm going to bet on America. And I always say to my European friends who say, "What the hell is going on over there?" I say, give us a few more years. Don't bet against us.
Yeah, well, listen, some toxicity that's been created, particularly, on the extremes of these parties. Okay, so I'm not going to indict one party over the other. We'll just say that there's extremes on both sides. You have a president in this book, 2054, who is ironically named Castro. I love you guys for that, because obviously I've been to Havana a few times, and we've got this president Castro. We also have a current president that's 81 years old. He's running for re-election, and it wouldn't be undiplomatic for me to say that he is probably frailer at 81 than he was at 65. Let's just put it that way. But you have something going on with President Castro, and obviously you can't ignore the coincidence there. So tell us a little bit about President Castro without giving up too much of the plot. What happens to him? And unroll it for us a little bit so we can get people appetite wet for this amazing book.
Sure. Well, when 2054 opens, obviously we're 2 decades after the end of this calamitous war with China, and they've been pretty tumultuous. And so politics in America has changed. And following current trends, what we see is that the Republican and Democratic parties, which now today in America are actually 2 minority parties, the majority of Americans identify with neither party. They've continued to bleed membership. And for their very survival, the extremes of the two parties, like you talked about, Anthony, they have to merge and they become what's called the Democratic Republicans, which was actually an early party in our country's history. And not without precedents. Let's remember the Democratic Party not too long ago was a coalition that included Northeastern liberals and Southern segregationists. So the fringes of the two parties merged together. And then you have a very charismatic independent president, Angel Castro, who wins, and basically gets the country back on its feet after the war. But somewhat problematically, like many leaders, they don't like to let go of power. So Castro, when we meet him, is scheming to extend out past his normal 2 terms in office. This is very, very controversial. And when the book opens, he's giving what will be the first speech in his new campaign, and he drops dead at the dais, apparently from a heart attack. But we talk about social media and the splintering of American society. Immediately, different narrative lines start emerging as to what happened to Castro.
Yeah,
and there's one particular piece of technology that gets in the mix, an idea of remote gene editing that could be involved in his mysterious death.
So, Jim, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing plot. Okay. And I can't wait to read the 3rd book. But Jim, I got to ask you this because I've heard you be interviewed on this. Your peers and your colleagues are saying, wait a minute, Admiral, this is going to happen a lot quicker in 2034 and 2054. What's your reaction to that?
I think there could very well be truth in that. Let's take both cases. 2034 we chose because that's where China will have amassed enough power to significantly militarily challenge the United States. You'll hear people say it's going to come in 3 years or 5 years. I just don't see it that way as I look at those economic trends. And I think over the last 24 months, we've seen the softening and the weakening of the Chinese economy and many of their positions. So it's a matter of debate. I'll stand with my 2034 date. However, 2054, in the 2 years since Elliot and I really wrote the book, now, if I had it to do over again, I might very well pull that forward because you see this acceleration in AI unfolding right in front of our eyes. So I'll stand on 2034. 2054, yeah, a fair number of people have said, I don't know, Jim, it's not going to be mid-century before that scenario starts to unfold. Elliot, you want to add anything to that?
No, I would just say, I think in all of these, and too, we're looking at events that there's some complacency around. It's been a long time since the United States has faced a peer level adversary in a war. It's been a long time since we've had a president pass away in office, whether of natural or unnatural causes. But these are all crises that chances are, we'll live again and see again in our lifetime.
So, Elliot, this question is for you. Because I get a lot of writers that are listening to Open Book, and so they want to hear from authors. How do you tackle the research and writing process? And did you always have this kind of a vivid imagination?
I'll start with the first part of that question. I think we talk a lot about what for these books, we talk a lot about the subject matter, and then, you start reading and you read and you learn till where you get to a point that you feel like your knowledge can support the story. And as you're moving through the story, if you feel like you've got gaps, you do a little more research. Or what's great in our partnership is, we bat these drafts around. So as opposed to when I'm writing books on my own, when I'm writing them with the Admiral, I can just sort of put in a section that says, write interesting thing about AI here, and he will fill in the gaps for me. So we do that. And I think, I've always been a reader. I've always loved stories. So I'm very happy with what I do now.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is my best fill in so far has been when Elliot wrote, describe massive war at sea. And then I did.
But Jim, just when I think I'm reading enough, I think of you and I say, oh man, that son of a bitch Stavridis is reading more than me. I got to open up another book. Okay. You wrote a great book a few years ago called The Leader's Bookshelf.
Oh yeah.
What are you reading now, sir? What's on your nightstand?
Yeah, I at this minute, I am just finishing a very thick work about navies at sea, and it's a novel by Mark Halperin. He wrote A Soldier of the Great War, and it's called The Sea and the Stars. Pretty evocative title, and it follows a Navy ship through combat in the Arabian Gulf. It's just a beautifully realized novel that also tackles some of the ideas we've talked about new technologies at sea.
So it's called The Sea and the Stars.
Yes, Mark Halperin.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. We're getting, unfortunately, to the period of time here where what I do with my authors, and I'd like to get this reaction from both of you. I have a couple of words I spit out, and then my authors react to those words. Okay.
Okay.
So, Elliot, when I say America, you say what?
Don't bet against us.
Okay. What about you, Admiral?
I say the tragedy of democracy is that in the end you elect the government you deserve. It's a quote from de Tocqueville.
Okay.
Let's avoid that tragedy.
Okay. I say China. You say what, Elliot?
Pay attention.
Okay.
Biggest challenge we face in this century.
Yeah. Okay. Singularity. This is for our young listeners out there. Ray Kurzweil wrote a book about this, saying that we're going to fuse the machinery with the human being. And again, I don't want to give away this plot, but there's some amazing things that you're saying in here, which are not necessarily fiction. They're near nonfiction, meaning they're about to happen here on planet Earth. But I say singularity, Elliot. What do you say?
I say robots will inherit the Earth, but they will be our children.
Okay. Admiral, you worried?
The singularity is not near, it's here.
Okay. Amen. Well, that's a good spin because that's the title of Ray's book. I read that book almost 20 years ago now, and I was like, all right, it's not going to happen. Here we are, and it's happening, right? So democracy, sir. Elliot, democracy.
The worst form of government as opposed to all the others.
Yep. Churchillian.
I'm going to echo that. That's what popped into my head. It's a quote from Churchill.
Okay. Conflict. I say conflict. You say what?
Coded into our DNA.
No, that's unfortunately true.
Changing every minute in front of our eyes.
Okay. How about these two letters? AI. Now, AI used to mean alternative investments for somebody like me, but AI now means artificial intelligence. Elliot, what do you say?
Coming fast, and faster every single day.
The world is unprepared for the arrival of AI.
Okay. Climate. That's for you, Elliot.
I think the third challenge in our series.
Okay.
Climate is the ultimate problem that we can only solve together.
Right. No, listen, I'm with you. And you're a seafaring person, so you can see it from all over the world, the impact that it has. Okay, these are the last three. Then I'll let you fine gentlemen go. 2024, Elliot.
Going to be quite the year.
Yeah. See, I like fighting, so it's going to be a great year for me. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun for me.
Fun for you.
What about you, Admiral?
Stay out of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Well, I don't go. I mean, listen, I could only last 11 days there. I get highs when I enter the Beltway. You have to worry about that. But I think we have to have a say in this fight. 2034, Elliot.
Like also going to be quite a year. I think the world will be radically different by 2034.
2034 is the point at which China potentially has the military capability to go toe-to-toe with the United States.
Okay. So if I make it, I'm not saying I'm going to, but who knows? If I make it the 2054, I'll be 90. So let's say 2054, Elliot. What's going to happen in my 90th year if I'm lucky enough to make it?
The world will start feeling a lot more like science fiction.
Okay. Admiral?
2054, I will be there to see it personally.
Okay, so the singularity's here, and you believe we can get there because of what's happening from a biotechnology perspective, from a genome perspective. You believe that we can get there.
I do, and I also believe that by 2054, I'll have a full head of hair like Anthony Scaramucci.
Well, I want your hair to be thicker than mine. Okay, I'm starting to lose it on the top here. My son told me, Dad, you don't have a 4 head, you don't have a 5 head, you now have a 10 head. Is that a nice thing to say to your dad? Very, very hurtful. Guys, it's phenomenal to talk to both of you. The title of the book is a very simple title. It's 2054. But I'm going to recommend to viewers and listeners, please buy 2034 because they go well together, and you won't stop reading till you get to the end of both of them. Admiral Stavridis, thank you. Elliot Ackerman, thank you for joining us today on Open Book.
Thanks so much, Anthony.